yet another coaching call. Remember, we do this every Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 p.m. Eastern. Joining me today are two of our favorite Montessorians, Matt Hillis of Bergamo and Deneen Goncalves of Nido. Matt and Deneen, thanks for being here.
As always, happy to be here.
Hello, hello.
And last week we did another Ask Me Anything with Matt. How did that go?
It was lively. I always actually enjoy those. So I think we should have them on a regular schedule. But I think we should also posit questions in advance as well. That could be helpful because sometimes things come up that I honestly don't have an answer to. I mean, it happens actually more often than I'd like to admit.
I don't believe that for a minute.
Yeah, so it would be awesome if I could do a little bit of research or some of those questions before I answer them. But I enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks for doing that. What would be a good schedule for that, Matt? You think like once a month?
Yeah, I think that pending other responsibilities, once a month is probably doable.
Okay, we'll plan on it. And then from our listeners, we'll figure out a system that allows you to deposit your questions early so we can do some research and just be prepared for everything. Diving into the topic today, this is not going to be anybody's favorite topic, I imagine, but it also might be the most important. The reason this is housed under thought leadership is I believe that Google Analytics is probably the single most important tool available to us when we're making attempts at measuring how effective our marketing is being outside of just conversion. So, and I'm going to try to say that in maybe a simpler way. You know your marketing's working when you're getting phone calls. But there are additional key performance indicators prior to the phone call that signal success or failure that might be more important to pay attention to, because sometimes when you're not getting the phone call, it doesn't mean that marketing's not working. It just means it's not working all the way through the funnel. And analytics is where we go to begin to determine that. I'm not a Google Analytics expert. I actually had a member of my staff train me for this phone call or for this coaching call. And so I'm going to rely on a lot of help and input from Matt and Deneen from a question standpoint. And then if we can't get any questions answered, I'll make sure to loop back around after the coaching call just in case. But without any further preface, I'm going to dive into analytics. I'd be interested from both Matt and Deneen, is this something you use on a regular basis at Bergamo? If so, can you give me more context? If not, is there ground we need to cover from a preface standpoint?
This is something that I glance at, and I glance at it because I have Qasim and a bunch of tech wizards that can basically tell me what I need to pay attention to. So I've spent some time in it before. It's probably something that I should understand a little bit more thoroughly. But up until this point, I've been really relying on Qasim and his team to tell me what's going on. And really, and I have no way of even knowing, because my results from doing digital marketing have just always been so positive that it's never really been something that I've had to go in and like really investigate it, because I'm like, hey, this is working. I know that's probably not the smartest thing to do, and so I would like to learn more how to use it really strategically, I guess.
Sure. I can tell you that I don't use analytics much myself either. I have a member of my staff that does that. It scares me. It's a lot of information and it's hard to distill. And so we go through once a month for clients. And that's a really good note, I think, for our members. This isn't something you have to look at daily. Analytics, I believe, is a lead indicator that's treated like a lag indicator. What I mean by that is analytics gives you the information necessary to make proactive decisions, but most people only look at it if something's failing. So if we can change that paradigm a little bit, I think it equips you to make really intelligent decisions. But our project managers look at analytics on behalf of our clients once a month. We do look at what has happened, but we look at it in order to inform what is going to happen. And I'll talk more about how to set that up. Did that make sense, Matt? Do I need to explain that further?
Yeah, no, it made sense completely to me. What about you?
I'm following. And I just want to say Melissa's very interested in this topic, Qasim. So you've got a fan.
Yay! I'm happy to hear it. And that doesn't surprise me at all because Melissa does really deep dive with things. So Melissa, please chime in with any questions if I'm glazing over stuff. Analytics is a completely free tool provided by Google. And they're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart. What they're doing is they're aggregating information that they use to market to people, stalk people digitally. So one of the disclaimers I'll make is that when you add Google Analytics to your site, you are also acquiescing to Google's terms of service, which basically says that they own all of your information. Now, my opinion is there's no way around this because they're going to get that information one way or the other. Because most, browsers are based on Google ecosystem. The search traffic tends to come from Google. So I think that there's not much we can do about it, but it is important. It's important for us to know. To install Google Analytics, you can just search for the words Google Analytics. And the first thing that comes up is the Google Analytics application. You'll get a page that looks like this, and just click on the Start for Free button, and the creation process is very easy. It's going to require you to have a pre-existing Google account. If you don't have one, you'll have to create one. But all of the Google properties are going to require a Google account, and there are many Google properties that we need for marketing. Google Analytics is the first. We're going to talk about Google Webmaster Console possibly next week. So get used to living inside of the Google ecosystem. Google Analytics is going to help you track really important things like how many people are coming to your site. This is something we need to pay attention to because it will let you know what's working both from a digital and analog perspective. So let's say you do a mail drop and you're using direct mail, or you're doing door hangers, or whatever type of marketing approach you've decided to work with. The single most important indicator I think that marketing is working is that more people are coming to your website, because that's the very first thing that they're ever going to do. So analytics will let you know who's coming to your website, where they're coming from. And this is not always complete data. In 2013, I believe Google rolled out what's called the not provided provision. And what that means is Google is not providing certain information, and they're withholding information that they believe will allow us to reverse engineer how their algorithm is constructed. So they don't want people like me to be able to game the system, essentially. So not all of the information is readily available, but a lot of it is. Enough of it is for you to know, to start to get a sense as to what's working and what's not working. We actually had a client recently reach out to us and say, hey, we pay yearly for this directory of schools. I'm curious as to whether or not it's something that we should invest in further. So I dove into our analytics, and we found out that the directory had only resulted in, I think, 12 referrals for the entire year. However, what's really interesting about those 12 referrals is it was great traffic. They visited 3 or 4 pages. They were on her site for 4 or 5 minutes, which is pretty significant. She didn't have goals set up in her analytics, so I couldn't tell if they converted, but it just gave us a really good view as to whether or not this directory was worth paying for. And so, less than 20 referrals isn't a lot, but it was quality traffic, and it gave her a solid sense as to whether or not she should continue with that marketing method. Analytics will do that for just about everything you invest in, as long as you look at it. Anything to add there, Matt, or anything I'm glazing over?
No, I'm actually kind of taking some notes here. So keep going.
Awesome. Analytics is, it's going to live on every page. So it will tell you specific things about specific pages. It's not just about your website. It's also about your users, where they go, how long they stay, what they visit, how often they return. It shows you percentage of repeat users. And we're actually going to open up an analytics profile. I have permission from a client who has pretty heavy traffic to use their profile as a case study. So I can show you how to slice and dice this. And I'd love from our live listeners, if you have any questions or specific use cases, we can dive in ourselves. Like I said, I'm not an analytics expert myself, but I know enough to be hopefully very dangerous. So we'll get through that together. Google Analytics is a little daunting to set up and configure. Creating the account is very easy, but there's a small amount of coding to be done. And I'm actually going to show you exactly how this works. So there's a 4-step process here. You want to create your account, which is, it takes a matter of seconds, truly. You can probably have an account set up in about 30 seconds if you already have a Google account. And then you want to add your website to the analytics account, which is also very easy. You just tell Google, hey, this is my website. The 3rd step is where everybody gets stuck, and also where everybody makes most of their mistakes. You have to add the tracking code to your website. Now, Matt actually doesn't know that I'm about to do this, so Matt, forgive me. But if you're a Neato member, in the 2nd plane or higher, we will do this for you for free, because A, we love you, and B, it also helps us when we want to ascend you later. So it's not just out of the goodness of our hearts. If and when you become a client, it gives us the information necessary to make sure that your marketing mechanism is performing better. So it's in our best interest to do this. As a matter of fact, as long as we don't get overwhelmed by it, I wouldn't mind doing this for our first plan members either. So we, reserve the right to maybe throttle the amount of clients that we're able to do this for. But if you need help installing your analytics, reach out and let us know. This is vitally important. So it's something that we want to make sure is in place for everybody. And right now we have the bandwidth from a manpower standpoint to make this happen. So reach out if you're having a hard time installing your tracking code. But I'm going to show you how to do this on this call. And then step 4 is we want to set up our goals in analytics. So I'm just going to pull up an analytics account. This is what analytics looks like. This is the home page. To install your analytics code inside the admin section of analytics, you'll notice that it's split up into these 3 tiers. The account view is your overarching view, and this gets really confusing. And to be frank, Google set this up for much, much larger applications. So the reason it's split up in these 3 tiers, account, then property, then view, is to allow much larger web applications the ability to split up their views according to how people might engage with their site. We're never going to use this. At least much smaller schools will never use this. I can't think of a use case where Montessori school will need to have multiple views, for instance. But just to give you a sense as to how this works, views live inside of properties and properties live inside of accounts. And so these are nested within each other. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah, no, it absolutely makes sense to me.
Okay, awesome. And let me know if I start to go too far off the rails. But what you're going to find is inside of the property section, you'll have your tracking information. And when you click on this, you can see tracking code. And this is the code that you need to install on your website. Now, the code generally needs to go in the head tag of your website. And if you know anything about website development, the website is split up into 3 sections: head, body, and footer. The head tag is the tag or the section of your website that fires first. And so Google wants the analytics code in your head tag. Now, a note is some web builders don't give you access to the head tag. I don't know why that is, but analytics will still work in most cases if it's in the body tag. So it's better to have it somewhere than nowhere at all. And this might be a conversation to have with your website developer. If you send your analytics code to your web developer and they say, hey, your head tag isn't available for whatever reason, it's okay to put it in your body tag. It's not quite as optimal because your head tag fires first and you want analytics to be the first thing it fires. So you're actually going to have slightly diluted information, specifically time on site information. People will be on your site longer than analytics realizes because it's not firing right away. But again, it's better than nothing. But analytics wants you to copy and paste this code into your head tag. With most websites, your head tag is also an include file, which means that it exists across your entire site. But if it's not, for whatever reason, you need to make sure that this code gets added to every single page on your site that you want to track. And my opinion is you want to track every single page. So you'll copy this code and you'll provide it to your website developer and say, hey, put this on every single page of our website. If you have a WordPress site and you're a Neato member, let us know. We want to help. You'll have to set up analytics and you'll have to provide us with access to your website, but we want to make sure that you have this information. So that's how to set up Google tag or install the Google site tag onto your website. If
now,
you have Google,
how does it work when you're using like an external landing page program like Lead Pages or something? Does that usually come, and you may be talking about this as part of the presentation, so forgive me if I'm jumping the gun here, but how do you link that into your analytics account?
It's a great question, and I'm not talking about it. Actually, I'm glad you brought it up. It's a huge fail point, Matt, and I can tell you that we've made this mistake in the past, and we've actually made this mistake on your campaign.
Oh.
Surprise! We've launched landing pages that we forgot to install our Google Tag Manager code into. And we come back 2 or 3 days later and find out, oh my goodness, we don't have data for this page. Now, it's not a catastrophic error as long as you catch it quickly.
Yeah.
But it is something to be cognizant of. The smart way to do this, and I'm not going to teach anybody how to do this on this course because it gets really intricate, but and honestly, it's something that I think you can only do if you have a marketing team or an internal web manager. Instead of using Google Analytics code, use Google Tag Manager. Google Tag Manager it's a repository within which you can add all of your codes. So like your Facebook pixel needs to be installed on every page. Your Google Analytics code needs to be installed on every page. If you're using something like Wicked Reports or Hotjar or True Conversion, there's all these codes that you need installed on every page. And so you can go through every single page and install all those codes one by one, or you can install Google Tag Manager across all properties. And then whenever you want to install new codes, you just drop it into your Tag Manager, and then Tag Manager lets you apply rules. So what we've done for Bergamo is Bergamo has Google Tag Manager installed. And now our team knows that anytime we create a new property, like a new landing page, we just dump Google Tag Manager onto that landing page, and then all of these subsequent codes are already installed automatically. But to answer your question directly, if you have separate properties like landing pages, you have to install these codes separately or they won't exist.
Okay, good to know.
It's also a good aside is if you're running Google Ads, we reconcile conversions between Google AdWords, which is now called Google Ads, and Google Analytics. And we do this because Google Ads can have the bad habit of over-reporting conversions. That's A. B, and I might get this reversed, but Google Ads is last click attributed and Google Analytics is first click attributed. So oftentimes when you're looking at Google ad campaigns, and this happened with 2 clients recently, and actually one of them is on this call live, we look at their campaign and we go, gosh, all their conversions are coming from branded keywords, which just stinks because you think to yourself, that's traffic I would have gotten otherwise. But when we dive into their analytics, we find, oh no, the traffic's actually coming from generic keywords, which means that it's people that found them that didn't know about them otherwise. And then they wait and they do research and then they come back and convert through branded campaigns. But we would not have known that information if we didn't have Google Analytics installed. And so Google Analytics gives you a much more detailed and honest view of the entire customer lifecycle. Google Ads just tells you, hey, this is the key phrase that they came in. This is the last thing they saw before they came in, which is not enough information to make strategic decisions from.
Okay. And that's actually really important, especially you talked about running offline campaigns and so you do a mail drop or you do a billboard or something, and and measuring the fact that you have more visitors. I like to use custom domains for specific things. So like if we're sending out a mailer for our toddler program, it would be like bergamoschools.com / toddler enrollment or something. And so that going to that webpage, I can physically see how many people have visited, when they visited, and I know when the mail hit. And then you can also use, and I know we're not talking about this today, but you can also use a trackable phone number as well, so that you can really start to see what is working offline. It's been very, very helpful for me.
I love that you brought up trackable phone numbers, Matt, because I forgot to include that in the presentation. But what's interesting about it is you can actually integrate trackable phone numbers with analytics.
Really?
Yeah. So if you're using a tool like Call Tracking Metrics or CallRail, those are the 2 biggest ones. If you're a Neato member, incidentally, we pay for an agency level Call Tracking Metrics account. So if you're the second plane or up, you can have Call Tracking Metrics for free. You only have to pay for the minutes you use, which is, it's a few cents a minute. It's nominal. So reach out to us if you want free call tracking numbers, because we'll give them to you. It's $2 per number a month, and then whatever it is a minute. But we pay for otherwise it would cost you $100 a month. But you can add call tracking metrics to analytics, and it records call-in information, and you can actually pipe that information and do manual conversion imports for Google Ads, which is what we do. Most agencies report conversions based off of time. So they say, okay, any phone call that lasts longer than 30 seconds is a conversion. That is just cheating to the nth degree, because so many phone calls last longer than 30 seconds that aren't actually conversions. We listen to every single phone call individually and then manually import those conversions at the end of every month.
Really, really interesting stuff. And actually, this is one of these things where, listen, we're all busy. Marketing isn't my main job. I'm trying to run a school. So when I really start to see all the things that are happening behind the scenes, it makes me happy that I have a team. I think for most of us, when schools get to a certain size, listen, we offer these lessons with Neato to be able to basically offer the information for a very, very motivated person who has a 25 child enrolled school. I think once you get up to a certain point, I really do want to advocate for people to, and it doesn't have to be with us. It could be with any agency doing this for you, because there is a lot behind the scenes that makes this work. So what Cosmo just went through really, really reinforced that for me.
I want to add to that, Matt. I appreciate you saying that. I think an agency, or maybe you might have a friendly parent who knows this stuff really well. I'd caution you against a prosumer, someone who's like, oh yeah, I do this on the weekends for my wife's, boutique clothing business online. That's one thing. But if you have a friendly parent who owns an agency, works for an agency, that really does know this stuff, that's a great trade to make. And, to Matt's point, it really, I think it'll pay dividends on a multiplied scale.
That parent is a long-term parent, because nothing, and I've experienced this before, not necessarily with like a marketing trade, but I've had parents do things, and then if something comes up at the school, or they move, or there's an issue that happens with their child in the school, you then have twice as many problems.
I hadn't thought about that. Good point.
All of a sudden, hey, I need to get into my marketing stuff, and it could be a problem. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah. Great point, Matt. So real quick, we're going to talk about how to set up your goals, and I'm going to dive into our analytics campaign. Going back, I'm going to go home just so you can see how I get here from the beginning. Goals are a little tedious to set up, but without them, your analytics campaign is just raw data. So you want to be able to, if you're going to dive into analytics once a month, which is what I recommend, you want to be able to go to your goals and just view the 2 or 3 or 4 things that you're tracking that prove success. Otherwise, this gets daunting. So you're going to go to the admin section. And then from the admin section, under the view, which is really where your analytics information lives, you're going to click on goals. And these are all the goals that we have set up, you'll notice. And these are the goal completions in the past 7 days. So I can just pull this up right now and see, wow, I've had 89 calls in the last 7 days. And this is a really high performing campaign. So we've had 196 orders in the last 7 days. Click on new goal. And more often than not, templated goals will serve you. Smart goals are goals that live on your page. Things that are like, when somebody presses this button, these goals scare me because they do tend to over or under report, because it has so much more to do with what Google is able to track. It has to do with like how well your website's built, best practice implementation, etc. Custom goals are if you want to get really, granular. So I'm going to ask you to stay with template until you're comfortable with Google Analytics. And the nice thing about goals is it's very, very, very linear. So what we're going to say is name the goal. Make sure that you're very descriptive in your names. Otherwise, you'll forget what this is. And these can be as long as you want it to be. So someone filled out the form on my contact page. That's an okay name for a goal, because you know exactly what it is, and somebody else who dives in knows exactly what it is. You can decide where this goal lives. Google's going to automatically assign a slot, a goal ID. So I would just let this alone and let Google default its nomenclature. More often than not, I think your goals should be destination goals. What this means is somebody accomplished something that you're intending for them to accomplish. So for instance, a tuition download. And the way to identify this, the big mistake that everybody makes is they include the domain name for their tuition page. So like bergamoschool.com/tuition. That's incorrect. It's actually the domain name for the thank you page that results after somebody downloads your tuition. You want to tell Google, when somebody gets to this page, that means that they took action. Well, if you're saying the goal is the tuition page, that just means that they're thinking about taking action. Does that make sense, Matt? Have I done an okay job there?
You're absolutely right. And, we just, I know that we did an update for our campaigns with Calendly. And we were corresponding yesterday about the thank you page that was set up. I know that now we can actually track our conversions in analytics from Calendly because they have an external thank you page. They used to not be able to do that, correct?
That's correct. It's a game changer for us.
Yeah, and so now we can actually track as a goal the tours that are being booked, which is great. And the way that that's done is that now when Calendly, when somebody actually books, it refers to an external thank you page, which is then firing that code. And so we can track that in analytics.
And that's a really important note too, Matt. I appreciate you bringing that up. We need separate thank you pages for every event that we want to track, because a lot of websites have generic thank you pages for everything. And what ends up happening there is, even if you have separate goals set up for it, imagine if you have the same thank you page for your tuition download that you do for your tour. Even if you set up 2 different goals, now those goals are going to record each other's conversions. And now you're over reporting conversions and you might not even realize it. A lot of web builders have this problem. Squarespace is very guilty of this. Squarespace will result in the same thank you page unless you specifically define otherwise. And so you'll have one thank you page for every single conversion on your website, which means every conversion is now being tracked as the same goal.
Wow. Well, that would be a huge problem
Yeah.
because I mean, you can see the total of things that were done, but you cannot separate that out into what actually happened.
We had an issue with a client who was on Shopify. They thought that they were getting hundreds of thousands of dollars in conversions. And when we dove into it, we found out that Shopify saves the thank you page as the order confirmation page as well. So if you order something from Shopify and then later you want to like get your tracking number or view the total or whatever, the email they send you allows you to revisit that thank you page. And what was happening is people are going back to the thank you page, as many as 30 times for some of your more A-type personalities. And so they were massively over-reporting their conversions by like a few $100,000. This is a big company. And so we were the ones that had to go in there and report the bad news because they were like, hey, can you do better with our Google Ads? And we came back saying no, because you're not doing as well as you think you are. And this happens all the time. So anyway, destination more often than not is going to be your goal. Duration goals are okay. This shows you who's on your site or who's on a specific page for a period of time. I like to use duration goals when I have a video on a page. Because if I've got a 3-minute video, I can set the duration goal to be like 3 minutes and 30 seconds. And then in my mind, I can see who's watching the video through fruition. There are better ways to do this, but this is the easiest way to do that. An event goal is another way to do that. But the problem with event goals is you can't always see if they've seen the video through to completion. But I think destination goal more often than not that's when you really get to see, hey, they filled out a form, they downloaded something, they actually did something that I want them to do. And here's where you get to define the URL that equals success. Now, what's interesting about this, and this is where people get a little caught up, is you're not entering the entire domain name. You're entering the domain name after your root domain. So if your root domain is bergamoschools.com and your thank you page, and this probably isn't a real thank you page, but is /thank you. Oh, wow, look at that. We've got a redirect. We're awesome. This would be the URL that I'm entering into my destination. And what this allows us to do is it allows Google to track across multiple properties. So like if you have a SSL certificate installed, but it doesn't fire for whatever reason, or if you don't have a redirect on your www, which happens for a lot of sites, www.bergamoschools.com and just bergamoschools.com are technically two separate domain names. But if you're allowing Google to overwrite your root, then you're making sure you're tracking across all properties just on this page. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me. I know, we're getting a little bit technical. Yes.
Awesome. This gets really cool. You can assign a conversion value. I don't know that we'd ever do that in Montessori per se, but if you knew for every tour I schedule, let's say 20% of all your tours convert. That means you get to take your annual tuition. Let's say 20% of all tours convert, and for a fact your retention rate is at least 1 year. Okay. You get to take 20% of your annual tuition, and now that's your conversion value. So everybody that signs up for a tour, let's say that your annual tuition, just using round numbers, is 10 grand. You take 20% of 10 grand, and that just became the value of a conversion. And now in analytics will show you how much money you're making from a conversion, which is really cool. So that's number one. And then the funnel conversion path gets really interesting. I'm not going to dive too deep into this, but if you want to start to identify where and when destination conversions are having an impact on your conversion goals, you can actually tell analytics what funnel and then what page people should be coming from, which is also really interesting and really cool. And now I'm not going to save this goal because this is somebody else's site, but this is how to set up goals. It's actually relatively straightforward. Choose template. I prefer that you choose destination in the very beginning, at least. Define what the destination is. You don't need to define either of these. And then click save, and bam, you have your first goal. Any questions about that?
I think it's really, really important if you're just starting with this to keep it as simple as possible. That's where I really want to echo what Qasim's saying about just doing a destination, and just start with one thing and see and make sure that it works. And then you can get more complicated as you move forward. But make sure that I have a habit of doing things where I'll make things more complicated than I need to. And again, this is why it's great to have an agency doing this for me. Is that if you're going to do this yourself, just make it as simple as possible when you start.
And if you're using an agency, this is a good way to police the agency. So many agencies have the bad habit of reporting on what I call vanity metrics. And basically that means they get to the end of the month and they're like, all right, what can we show that's good? And there are actually software tools out there that will do this for you as an agency. They'll just comb through all your analytics data and identify what looks positive and create a report against that. But if you have goals identified and you talk to your agency before you start and you say, hey, what's our key performance indicator? And, for most Montessori schools, it's going to be schedule a tour. So now you get to define a goal around the number of tours that are being booked, and that's what they have to report against every month. And so it's just a really good way of getting everybody on the same page so you all know how you define when you're winning. Here are some things that we can set up for goals. Downloading tuition information, I think, is a great one if you're getting to your tuition. We've had a lot of pushback from our members on this, and I understand why. It's a little uncomfortable, but I just have to tell you, this is huge. The members that are getting their tuition, they're getting an inordinate amount of leads, and they're high quality leads, and you get to drop them into a nurture, and you get to do them the service of providing them with more information on an ongoing basis. And I've said it maybe 1 billion and one times, but I'll say it again. Even if you don't do it, your competitors will. And now you're at a disadvantage because now your prospects are in your competitor's funnel and they're getting pummeled with their information, but you're not giving them the opportunity to see your information and learn more about Montessori as a model, which I think is flawed. So I'd encourage you to get your tuition and then track that as a goal. I'm going to pause there, Matt, and maybe I feel like you're the one that taught me this, so you might have more to add there.
No, I mean, we've talked about this 15 times in these calls, and the number one lead magnet that we've used, and being able to track that and see that, those are interested people. They are definitely people that you want to communicate with in the future. So, if you're not doing it, and here's the thing, I still see schools not doing this, and it's just the easiest thing in the world to collect email addresses and then market them for free. So do it.
A few other ideas, of course, schedule a tour, and you can now track goals in Calendly where we weren't able to before, which is really cool. Contact form, your generic contact form, watch your virtual tour if you have one, subscribe to your newsletter if you have one, complete your admissions form if you have one.
Yeah, and one of the things that we want to add in the future as another lead magnet is an automated response about what the waiting list is. So that's when I started thinking about these things, what are the most common questions that people have, especially when they're on your website. They want to learn about your program, obviously. They want to know how much it's going to cost, and they want to know if you have spaces available. And I think that having some type of automated response, like if somebody wants to know if there are spaces available or how long generally the waiting list would be, and this is really more applicable for early childhood programs because openings can come up through the year. That I think is going to be another really good lead magnet as well. So when we launch that, we will definitely release that to our members too.
That's a great point, Matt. I love that idea. Deneen, I'm curious from your perspective, because you were about to be a head of school. If you were on this webinar and you saw what we just showed you, would you feel comfortable setting up analytics and goals?
You had to ask me that question right when he started crying, huh?
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah, I'm just listening here, learning similar to what Matt is doing. So I imagine that this will be really, really helpful for so many of our members. And I did want to say thank you for offering that code to install the code, because I feel like that alone can be a bit daunting. So yeah, this is great.
Yeah. And that, I want to echo that to all of our members. We're here to help. And if there's ever anything like this where you go, hey guys, this would be so much easier or better if you can do it for us or teach us how to do it, let us know. Because, oftentimes I don't realize what's hard. And so as much as we can help, within the confines of not going out of business, we're going to. But that's awesome. That's great feedback. Looking at your data, I want to do this briefly because it can get really overwhelming, but I just want to show our members some of the things that we can do inside of analytics that I think you'll find of value. And I'm using a client of ours that has a significant amount of traffic because it lets me showcase some of what's possible. Everybody's going to be a little bit different. And, you might not necessarily have 4,600 people in the last week, but your information is important. As a matter of fact, it's actually a little bit easier to get granular. If you only have 500 people a month, you really get to see what people are paying attention to. So the first thing I want to show you is how to look at your traffic sources. And this means where people are coming from. So you're going to go into acquisition And then we're going to go into all traffic and view channels. And I realize that's a little counterintuitive because you think it would be source medium, but we're going to look at channels first because the sources get a little too granular. So channels is going to show us from the archetypal channels where our traffic is coming from. And you can see that this client has the majority of their traffic coming from paid search because they're running a lot of paid search. And then about 20% of their traffic is coming from organic search. And you can break this up by day, week, or month. Here's the amount of traffic that's coming from direct. One note I'll make is that direct traffic doesn't necessarily mean direct. Oftentimes it's Google can't tell where it's coming from, and so they assume it's direct. But they might have clicked through from a link on another site. And if Google can't see that for whatever reason, then it looks like direct traffic. Referral traffic is traffic that comes from another website, and I'm going to show you how to find that in a minute. And this is really important for Montessori schools because we exist in a lot of directories. And then, of course, there's display, which is display advertising, and social traffic. Some benchmarks for you. You can see one of the first things I think you should pay attention to actually is the percentage of new users. So it makes sense that in paid search, the majority percentage of your traffic is new. And it makes sense in your organic search that your users would be repeat users. That's my opinion. Your bounce rate is something you want to manage. This client has an extremely high bounce rate. Anything under 50% is good. Anything over 50% is concerning. And a bounce rate means that when somebody comes to your website, they leave immediately. And the time on site can be variable. I haven't gotten a really good finger to the pulse as far as exactly what Google determines to be an exact time on site because it's not information that they're good at sharing, but it means that they're generally just not engaging at all. Now, you can have a high bounce rate on a specific page, and that can be okay. For instance, if you have a page for people to download your tuition, expect that to be a high bounce page because it doesn't go anywhere. It's nowhere for them to learn. But if your homepage or your about page has a high bounce rate, that means you need to go into your homepage or about page and improve the content there because it's not compelling. Average pages per session means the number of pages they're viewing when they land on your site. You'd like to see this to be above 2.5. 2.5 is high. And so if you can get people to view 2.5 pages on average, that means that you're doing really well. Under 2 pages, I think needs improvement. This client, again, they have a very direct offering. So I would expect them to have a low page per session, but it's not a great number. Their average session per duration is actually okay. You want this to be over a minute, and they're hovering around there for all channels almost. And then things like conversion rate, you can actually customize your conversions to view all of your goals, which is pretty cool. But this is your traffic by channel, and then you can see traffic by source here. And here's specific referral sources and specific referral channels, which is pretty cool too. So for instance, if you're in like Great Schools as a directory, you can see all of the traffic that Great Schools is sending you. And then you can also see the quality of that traffic. What's the bounce like from that traffic? What's the conversion like from that traffic, et cetera? Any questions about that from Matt or Deneen or our live audience before I move on?
I don't have any questions.
Awesome. The other thing I'd like to show is there's demographic information built around our audience, which is really cool. Now you have to enable your demographic reports because Google is, in some instances, going to alert people that they're capturing demographic information. But you can look at things like age and gender and make sure that they're aligning with who it is that you're marketing to, which is, I think, really interesting. You also get to see within your audience where they're coming from, and then potentially who they are from a demographic standpoint. This is a national company, but you might see that you have a bunch of traffic coming from counties or cities or areas that aren't relevant to you, which is really important. It might mean that you're running ads that are too broad. I've seen quite a few schools that are running national Facebook ads and they don't even realize it because Facebook's demographic segmentation isn't always straightforward. And you can see,
I've absolutely seen that. Yeah.
Yeah, especially when you're boosting posts, that happens a lot. I talked about bounce rate a little bit. You'd love to get this number under 50% if at all possible. It's hard. I mean, that means you have a really engaging site, but it's a good note. The other thing I want to look at is behavior. You can see from a behavioral standpoint what pages people are engaging with most. For Montessori schools, my experience has been that your highest engaging page, of course, is your root. And if you see / that just means that it's your homepage. Google's not showing you your domain. And then your second highest converting page tends to be your about page. And most schools don't realize that. And most schools glaze over their about page. There's 1 or 2 sentences, about the history of your school. And the about page is an excellent, excellent page to make a sales pitch on. As a matter of fact, I'm going to pick on my agency real quick just because I'm kind of proud of it. But you'll notice that our about page isn't really an about page. It's more of a sales page. You go to About Solutions 8 and instantly I'm talking about you. And then we segue into who we are and give a timeline about, all that good stuff. But in the beginning, it's kind of a friendly bait and switch. And I think you can do the same thing. And Matt, I think you actually have a really great about page. I specifically like your Our Story.
Yeah, there are entire, if you just Google search how to write an about page, there's a lot of great blog posts from people much smarter than me about why that's important and how to structure that. And again, like Qasim said, it's going to be one of your more visited pages. So absolutely, like that's something where you want to have good stuff. I mean, we put the video on there for a purpose because, and again, great. You can go and track. This is a great thing for a duration goal right here too, right? You can see how long people are watching the video. So yeah, that's specifically why I did that.
Awesome. I'd pay attention to the content, especially when you're publishing blogs, because you can start to see what information, and this is where it ties into thought leadership really. You begin to see what content is resonating with your users. And let's say you publish a blog on Montessori Math and it has the highest average time on page and the lowest bounce rate. Now hey, my parents are really interested in Montessori Math. Or maybe specifics about the curriculum. And you get to begin kind of chasing rabbits down holes. You also get to look at what's performing poorly. And it doesn't mean that you write less about it. Maybe that what you wrote isn't robust enough. And it just lets you know where to point your resources as is necessary. I'm going to go back to my slides. The cost per conversion we talked about a little bit. Devices. That's also really kind of interesting too. This is cool. So inside of analytics, you get to see what browsers and operating systems people are using. And you also get to see what devices people are using. This is important for you because you might find out, wow, I have so many parents coming in on a mobile device, but my bounce rate on mobile is much higher. I need to improve my mobile experience. And I think things like that are important. And again, it could take you about 20 minutes to walk through your entire analytics and once a month. And then that gives you just all of the action items you have for the month to follow. Some quick tips. You can use different chart types to make data easier to understand. Google has some awesome customization abilities. And if you go to right beneath the home section is the customization section. And you can click on dashboards and you can create a custom dashboard. And what's nice is they have templated dashboards. I'm not going to create one for this client because I don't want something to appear in his analytics, but it will import information for you. And you now get to decide, I want to see, show me these pages over time and this specific audience over time, et cetera, which is kind of cool. Measure the quality of your traffic. We talked a little bit about, just look at, the audience, the engagement. Google also has the ability to identify slow loading pages. This is really important. And every single website on the planet is subject to what we call code degeneration. I don't honestly understand exactly why this happens, but it happens. As a matter of fact, when I clicked on Matt's Our Story, I just made a mental note in my mind that I need to increase the look at site speed again because it took longer than I want that site page to load. And so you can see your site speed on every single page over time and how long it's taking to load and how long your average redirect is. And Google, look at this actually, we have 2 pages that are in the red. And so this is Google saying, hey, you need to go pay attention to these 2 pages. And one of them is our root page. So I need to jump on that for this client. You can also assign values to your goals, which we talked about a little bit, monetary values if necessary. I know this is a heady topic, but it's important. Any questions from Matt or Deneen or our listeners? Anything that we want to dive deeper into or specific use cases?
Gosh, I'd love to hear from the group if anybody has anything specific. I'm fascinated by this, and you could spend a lot of time, kind of, for lack of a better word, going in and tweaking out on this, because there's so much information. I, again, really want to implore people to keep it simple and start slow, and make sure that you are tracking the things that matter most, right? Determine those things that are really, really essential, that you can start to see drive things like tours and drive things like applications. I really want to get to the point where you can start to assign that monetary value for leads and conversions. I think that's really fascinating too, just for building a budget, right? If knowing, like, we're starting to think about our budget for the 2019-2020 school year, and the data isn't always going to be perfect, and it's not always going to go exactly to plan, but it's a great place to start when you can start to see, great, I'm raising my tuition here. This is what I can spend on marketing. This is what I can afford for professional development. This is what I can afford for teacher salaries. It just helps. So yeah, I'm obviously a fan, and this has been a really eye-opening session for me.
Awesome. I'd love to be able to assign values to some of our conversion goals. I think that's great. And our listeners, I'm going to hang tight for another couple minutes, because I know sometimes it takes some time to type questions, but please don't be afraid to jump in here and ask. We can dive into specific use cases too, if there's something that is specific to your school that you want us to know or go over.
So Kasim, I'm looking at our course list in our members section. So I'm imagining, if I'm like a new head of school, or this is like, kind of, there's a lot of information, how can you take it in bite sizes? And is our course list helpful along with that process?
Gosh, that's such a great question. I'm trying to remember if I made a course. I think we did, and I'm looking at it.
Yeah, we do have one on Google Analytics. We have so many great courses. That's why I asked this question, because I imagine, we could create some tracks where, if you're a brand new school, or if you're a school looking to revamp your marketing, like, we could help people go through the tracks. Here's the course you want to take to do this, this, and this, just to kind of make it a little bit easier, because I imagine it's a bit overwhelming.
You're absolutely right. Honestly, that's a fail point of mine. I got so excited when we started Nito that we just overwhelmed people with information and content. The core track I'd like people to look at is actually the Montessori Marketing Method. And this took everything that Matt has taught me, and we just put it into what I hope ends up being a logical sequence. It's what these coaching calls are for. We're kind of developing this sort of linear, hey, here's when and how to approach these items. But to your point, it's not customized for specific tracks or use cases. And I don't know that I know how to do that just yet. I think I might need your help, and maybe the help of some of our members.
Yeah, definitely. Melissa's got a question. She says, great info. I'm that friendly parent at our school. I've been with them for over 10 years. We're revamping our website and things with good info to make sure we're settling things up. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for chiming in, Melissa. I appreciate that. And let me know how the website revamp goes. For our members that aren't aware, we actually have a website template that's available to our 3rd and 4th grade members. It's pretty heavily customizable. You can customize the logo, all the imagery, and the colors, which is nifty. And we have a website template that we're trying to build for our 2nd plane members. And there will be a small incremental cost to host it, but it's really robust, and it's built around all of the best practices that Matt has created for Montessori schools. So when that's ready, I'm hoping it's ready in the next month. It's actually ready now. We just need somebody. We need a guinea pig that's willing to take it on. So if you are that guinea pig, or you know somebody that's willing to be, let us know, and we'll cut you a sweetheart of a deal. But when that's ready, we'll make that available to all of our members too. And that hopefully will also come equipped with the ability to really easily install and view analytics. And our analytics course is worth looking at. This does a step-by-step walkthrough of setting up your analytics account, installing your analytics code, and then some of the key items behind using Google Analytics. So if you're interested in diving deeper, I'd recommend taking this course. And I think that's all we've got. This was a good talk. Appreciate everybody's time today. Matt and Deneen, thanks as always for being here.
Yeah,
course.
thanks for the info, Qasim.
Yeah, to our participants, we will see you next week.
Hey, real quick notice, I'm going to be in Atlanta with the Montessori Administrators Association of Atlanta. If you happen to be in Atlanta, I'd love to see you come out to our training session that we're doing on Saturday. So I'm not sure if we have anybody on the call right now, but if you're watching this later, please do come to our session. I'm looking forward to it.
That's awesome. Let me know how it goes, man.
All right.
Alrighty, folks. This was a good talk.
Thanks, guys. See you next week.
See you next week. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.